In my life's quietest moments, I pondered the depth of trust and love. Do all your clients get to feel your ass, Jenny? This question haunted me, echoing through our once serene home, now a silent witness to betrayal. Married to Jenny, 10 years my junior, our bond was a blend of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Yet beneath this idyllic surface lay secrets. Jenny's clandestine life as an escort, a reality I stumbled upon through a misplaced bank statement. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. I have no doubt that reading a financial statement has made many individuals unhappy. It is certainly very common occurrence. Most likely produced calamities considerably worse than my own. But it didn't help. Not a bit. I was just going through some papers on my wife's desk at home, trying to figure out whether she had paid the phone bill or something similar, something simple and harmless. That's when I discovered it beneath a mound of invoices and other belongings. A bank statement from Barclays, which I probably only noticed because we do all of our business with HSBC, and the blue color on the heading drew my attention. I suppose she'd chosen another bank to keep it hidden, which was ironic given that the difference prompted me to take note and flick through it. First, I examined the name at the top, which stated Jenny Matthews, so no surprise there, but I had never heard of the address. We resided on the west end of London, a long way south of Cambridge. Next, I'd examine the bottom figure of £17,546, a clean balance. But where did it come from? I had no idea. Then I looked at the list of transactions over the previous 3 months and was astounded by the consistent high sums of money that had been flowing into it. £600 one day, more than 1,000 a week later, and 800 merely 6 days later. So it went on. Now I make a solid living from my business and am accustomed to large sums of money. Jenny, on the other hand, only worked part-time for a public relations firm on occasion, usually in the afternoon or evening, and only on weekends, standing in for someone at a function or other. Even then, it was largely for fun, because it didn't pay a fortune. When I perused the list of rewards, I was truly blown off guard. Every month, the same amount of money was deducted by a standing order, £567. The sum sounded too familiar. I approached her cabinet, a fancy, old-fashioned roll-top design from the late 19th century. I opened it and took out my wife's banking file. She was usually extremely neat and precise. Jenny and I knew where to look because we shared everything. There are no secrets between us, or there hadn't been until then. I located the HSBC statements and quickly scanned through them to find what I needed. I had no qualms about reading through her bank account information because she showed it to me on a frequent basis. There it was, in black and white. Her agency salary is £567 per month. I was lost. Absolutely lost. Jenny appeared to be paying herself a salary from her own bank account. Why the hell would she do that? Did she actually have a job? Where did the money come from? Was there anything to worry about? Was that any of my business? It was like hell. What was Jenny up to? I grabbed the Barclays statement again and studied it in greater depth, noticing that the only money ever removed appeared to be monthly payments, while the payments were random, frequent, but without any pattern. It immediately occurred to me that there was far more money pouring in than coming out. So I went back to the balance at the bottom of the last page. It did not cost £17,546. I had overlooked the zero and it was £175,460. My name is Jim Matthews and I'm 38 years old, pretty decent and manage my own computer firm with 2 employees. My wife, Jenny, is 28 years old, 10 years to the week younger than me, which I believe is approximately the ideal age difference. I give her my maturity because I have life experience and live a very comfortable life. She gives me her youthfulness, her abundant beauty, and all the joy in the world. We both love one another unconditionally, both spiritually and physically. After 3 years of marriage, we are both undeniably in love with each other, as I have been since our first date. I'd been up in London for a meeting with a guy to arrange a deal with Google, and I was sitting in the hotel bar afterwards thinking about the potential benefits of going along with their proposal. When Jenny walked in, my insides flipped. It's not like I didn't have a girlfriend. In fact, I probably had too many, although none of them were very special. I thought she had the potential to be something amazing, but only if I could get to know her. Jenny was 5 feet 6 inches tall, thin, and had wonderful, shapely, tanned legs that seemed to continue on forever from the delicate high heels on her feet till they disappeared into the very short cocktail dress she wore. She had long black hair, deep brown eyes, and a beautiful, tiny, turned-up nose. My ideal girl wasn't a classic beauty, but she didn't have to be an everyman, and the entire place must have been admiring her, no doubt with identical ideas to mine. She simply exuded breeding grace, confidence, and fun in sex, though not necessary in that order. I'm sure everyone watched her as she looked around and nodded to the receptionist, who definitely recognized her, definitely a regular resident, a regular. When she gazed straight at me, my insides did a flip as her warm brown eyes faded away. Is there any doubt that I desired her? I smiled back and greeted her, unsure what to do next, but didn't have to worry about it. A smile that might have lighted up the street outside flashed across her face as she walked towards me, perhaps implying that. "Hello, you must be James?" She surprised me by saying Jim rather than James. I responded. Perhaps my voice is hoarse. "James, Jim, what is the difference?" She laughed, and I wasn't going to fight with her. "Can I sit down?" she inquired in her fairly clipped, very British upper-class but quite charming accent. Of course, I responded immediately, leaping up and pulling the chair back for her. Even the manner she sat demonstrated class, as if she had been trained how to do so at a prestigious finishing school. I questioned, why me? What had I done to pique the interest of this dream about legs of a woman? How did she know my name? "I'm Jenny," she explained. "I apologize for being late. Nonetheless, I was delayed. Thank you for waiting." She then glanced at me and asked, "Are you all right, Jim?" I was okay. But she later chuckled when she told me I appeared completely shocked. I recovered quickly, however, and we were soon engaged in light banter, thrilled to realize that we shared so many interests, the same music, tennis, and Indian cuisine. Believe it or not, even rugby. Jenny was an intelligent woman who could speak on a variety of topics, unlike the others I'd been with recently. Then her cell phone rang. She excused herself and responded to it. I overheard her say, "No, I am here. No, he is here as well. Couldn't be. He is here with me. Dear." Golly, hang on, Elmo. She glanced at me quizzically. The smile returned to her attractive features, and I stared back. "Were you expecting me by chance?" she asked. "No, but I'm extremely glad you arrived," I responded cheekily. "You are not James Green at all, are you?" "No, I'm Jim Matthews." "Shit," she murmured, giggled, and lifted her phone. She said, "I was late, and I had the wrong James or Jim." Her use of profanities with her fancy accent was fantastic. It sounded so out of place, but so natural. She turned her head and partially covered her mouth, so I couldn't hear the next few exchanges between her and whoever was on the other end of the telephone. I knew I was going to lose her in the next few minutes, so I anxiously tried to think of something humorous to say when she ended the call. Jenny turned back to me, still clutching the phone. That smile, almost a grin, spread back across her face. "No, he's really cute." She spoke over the phone while staring straight at me, ensuring that I could hear quite well in a rugged kind of way. I think I might have blushed. "Okay, then. Give him my apologies the next time he visits the UK, maybe." And she ended her call by putting her phone back inside her back. Then she spoke. "Looks like I missed my appointment." "Never mind. It will maintain the smile." Her expression never changed. "What do you want to do this evening, assuming you are free? How about we do it together?" I didn't tell her what my first option would have been, and instead proposed we go out to supper. She readily consented. And this is exactly what we did. This was the best lunch of my life, and I barely noticed what we ate. I was already under her spell. Jenny informed me about her profession in public relations, how she scheduled meetings, organized discreet parties, and assisted her agency in bringing individuals together at the perfect time. She obviously enjoyed it, and I was hoping she'd love me just as much. Following the meal, I walked her back to the taxi rank. I was overjoyed to find that there was a short queue and that I would have more time to converse and hug her. I wrapped my arm over her and she snuggled up, placing her arm around my waist and hugging close to me. I kissed her lightly on the cheek, and she returned the favor. The delicious smell of her sent my senses into overdrive. Then she looked around, moved me between her and the others in the queue, wrapped her arms around my neck, and drew me down till our lips connected. Heaven. Only the briefest of touches. But it was like discovering the land of milk and honey, and I held the honey in my arms. I got carried away and almost embarrassed myself as I kissed her more fervently, sliding my hands over her back and feeling the gentle curve as it descended to her bottom. "Hey, hang on," she cried, then laughed. "Give a girl a chance, won't you? We have only just met." I drew back, disappointed but not really frustrated. But not really. This was a very exceptional girl, and the effort was worthwhile, worth the wait. "Sorry," I apologized. She got carried away and giggled sweetly yet again. She said, "Slowly kiss me. It will be worthwhile in the long term." Christ, I was lost. And I believe it was then that I fell in love with Jenny, my wife. That was it. On our first accidental date. I proposed we go back to my hotel for a nightcap, but she was not interested, teasing me that I wanted a little more than that, and that a first date was simply too soon. "Can we see you again?" I inquired, and she tormented me again, humming and hearing about if it was worthwhile all the time, holding on to me, pressing me against her gorgeous tiny form and making me insane with need. "Okay," she finally relented. She shrugged her gorgeous shoulders. "I will call you. What is your number? I do not trust you." I spoke a bit boldly. "You give me yours, and I will call you." "No way, Jim," Jenny responded quietly. "I don't give out my phone number, especially to gorgeous strangers. I will call you." We reached a compromise and decided to meet the following Tuesday. Too long for me. However, this was the earliest she could manage. What was I going to do with this fresh information about my wife's affairs? Why did she have so much money? And where did it come from? Sure, her parents were wealthy. I owned an estate in Kent. I hunted and shot pheasants, and I possessed a modest stake in one of the smaller merchant banks. Someone who had also survived the aftermath of the Big Bang. So clearly the family was well connected. There was no reason why my wife would be without money, even sums like that. But where did it come from? And why? An obscurity of considerable sums. It had to do with the public relations firm she worked for. But honestly, I had no idea. I would ask her. I knew I couldn't because she was keeping it from me. There was a reason, and I had to find out what it was, no matter what the cost. I have to say, it scared me a little. Though it seemed implausible, Jenny appeared to be involved in some nefarious business or something. I had to go down to London a few days later, so I looked up the address from the statement. It was a posh suburb that reeked of money. Old money. Jenny's family would feel right at home here. At the very least, that helped to relax me. I examined the brass plates on the door, but none of them indicated anything. Just a few that caught my eye. Corporate and Golden Circle agencies. According to what I hear, the others are all accountants or stockbrokers. I waited for a while, but nobody came. Or leave. There's no joy there. I'd run out of ideas and had no idea how to proceed. All I could do was face her. However, this did not appeal to me at all. She was hiding something from me, and now it appeared that her family was involved. I needed to figure out what, and perhaps more importantly, why. Our second date was very remarkable, and I recall what she was wearing. The snug denim pants and white sweater would have been flattering on any lovely woman. Pierre Cardin simply has that skill. But on her, it looked amazing. I am sure designers like him were inspired by women like my wife. A woman like my wife, perhaps, was responsible for launching thousands of ships. We went to the theater, then had a late dinner. Once again, it was excellent. We have absolutely no notion what we are eating. Afterwards, the two of us went down the Thames's banks, arm in arm, as lovers have done throughout history. And I imagined she would return to my hotel. She did, and I expected she'd come up to my room. She did, and I kind of figured she'd join me in bed. She did not. She would not. Not that we didn't enjoy ourselves, not that I couldn't persuade her to take off her sweater. Her beautiful, firm jugs were everything and more than I could have wished for. She grabbed me and kissed me fiercely, pressing her tongue in between my lips and twisting it around mine, the very taste of her putting me into a trance. My fingers began to undo the top button, and she gasped and yelled out, her bum already gyrating as she thrust herself up to my hand. Then she simply stopped, realizing how far we were going and where it would go. "No, thanks. No," she muttered, grasping my hand but without the resolve to push it away. "I am not ready. Not yet. Please don't. It was probably the most difficult decision I'd ever made in my life till then. I paused. I pulled back. She made no effort to stop me, almost daring me to defy her, gazing at me and pleading Lee, but trusting me not to. Then the moment passed, and we curled up, kissing and embracing each other warmly. Bloody awful. We were grown-ups, me in my 40s and she in her 20s, but she wasn't prepared. Not yet. I inquired as to the nature of the problem, if one existed. She nodded, murmured, yes, and fell into tears. What can you do if you love the woman, as I surely did? Then you accept it. I held her tightly, spoke to her softly, and assured her that everything was well. We laid there like that, and my passion slowly faded. Only my love for her remained. After about an hour, she sighed and ultimately stood up, apologized in sobs, and tears began to flow down her cheeks again. "I apologize," she whimpered. "I am in such a mess. What a terrible disaster. You have no idea. I have no idea at all." I drew her close to me. The tighter the better, since it will alleviate all of her difficulties. For the time being, they did. "Thanks, Jim." Finally, she spoke. "You're the most wonderful man." She kissed me, and everything seemed normal. We cuddled for a while, but it had to come to an end, and I found myself once again guiding her to the cabs. It's 1 a.m., and there's still no sex, but I'd never felt this good in my life. I considered confronting Jenny with the issue of where all the money had come from and why she was paying herself. At best, it could come from her relatives. Perhaps cash. They were hiding away from the tax man. That piqued my interest for some time, but it was too easy and convenient. I knew there was more to it. I didn't have any other explanation, just a knot forming in my stomach. That not everything was what it seemed, and that I was in for a big surprise. Even then, I had no idea how much of a shock I would be in for. I followed her all the way to London one evening when she was going on one of her PR business tasks, keeping an eye on her Audi to see if she actually went to the hotel where her employer had lined up some meeting or if she would sneak away to meet someone nasty. But no, there she was, pulling up outside the correct hotel. Good as gold, she steps out of her automobile and hands the keys to an attendant. Nothing to be upset about. And several hours were spent by following her all the way from Cambridge. What a bloody fool I'd become. I vowed to simply ask her. The explanation would probably be fairly straightforward. I'd ask her that night when she returned, however late it may be. But she did not return that night and awoke me in the morning. The ring of the phone jolted me back into the real world, away from my disturbed sleep, as I rose from the sofa where I had spent the night waiting for her return. "Hello, Jim," she chirped, as cheerful and bright as a lark. "Sorry, I became pretty involved in some debates last night, and the corporation paid for a hotel room for me. Things went well. They'll return before lunchtime. How about lunch at the ball? I will tell you about it." "Why didn't you call me last night?" I demanded. "I have been worried." "I did," she answered, concerned. But there was no response. "I've left a message." I looked down, and the phone's message light was flashing. She must have called while I was on my way back from London, and I had missed it since I was preoccupied with other things. I promised to meet her at the ball, but I was still unsure. I felt the world closing in around me. I didn't know what else to say. The next week I followed her again, feeling like a traitor and hating myself for my suspicion and the ideas that were running through my mind. Our third date was defining. I looked forward to it like an adolescent, hoping against hope that everything would go well and that I'd be able to get her in bed. But more importantly, I prayed that the date would go well, that she would be delighted, and that the unpleasant tensions from our previous date would not recur. We met on neutral ground halfway between London and Cambridge at a wonderful little inn that I had discovered a few months before. It was an inspired decision, and Jenny was at ease from the outset. Everything I could have wanted from the time she walked in and turned everyone's head. So she whispered into my ear at the end of our supper. "Do they have rooms here, Jim?" she inquired, and my prayers seemed answered. It is impossible to express how lovely that night was, but I will try. I wasn't a virgin by a long shot, but it appeared like I'd found one, a rare find in one so lovely. She was already in her 20s, yet she was scared when I undressed her, as if I were the first person to do so. Shivering as I unfastened her dress and let it fall to the floor, I placed her back on the bed, determined that if it was her first time, she would never forget it. Her breathing was heavy and fast, her eyes closed. "Jim, Jim, thank you, Jim," she whispered softly. But the rest was lost as a tremor swept through her beautiful figure, which could only mean one thing. Her body relaxed, and she laid back. She finally opened her eyes and looked up at me, her expression saying just one thing. "I love you, Jim. I genuinely love you." My woman stuttered uncertainly. "I guess I'm ready. Please be gentle then." We had fantastic sex. I regained control after she withdrew slightly while I made love to her, and she returned it completely. We lay peacefully in each other's arms, enjoying each other's nakedness, satisfied and content. "Thanks, Jim," Jenny whispered into my chest. "Thank you, my darling." I kissed her and told her how much I loved her, too. "I needed it, Jim," she explained after a few moments. "I needed it for a long time, and I'm so glad it was you." The second time I followed Jenny, it was even easier. I knew the hotel where her appointment was scheduled, so I let Jenny go ahead of me, arriving about half an hour later and wondering what the heck I was doing, and exactly what was I going to do. I slunk into the reception area, scared that she would notice me, and I had no idea what excuse I could provide for my presence. She wasn't present, of course. Why should she be? So I made my way to the bar, peering in and deciding that this was all so foolish and childish, and that if she wasn't there, I'd leave right away. But Jenny was at the bar, conversing with a guy. She was sitting with her back to me, but I recognized her, and the man she was speaking with appeared to be much older than Jenny, possibly in his late 50s, expensively dressed and perfectly groomed. I felt the strain leave me as I realized he was precisely as he should be, a wealthy client of the agency. Clearly, she was negotiating arrangements with several businesses. I felt like a fool, condemning myself for suspecting Jenny was engaged with someone, despite the fact that I hadn't even admitted to those thoughts until that point. What was I supposed to do then? I was still no closer to the truth regarding the money, but at least my main concern had been alleviated and she was not having an affair. Perhaps this guy had anything to do with the money she'd been hiding away. But I wasn't a super detective and had no way of moving on. Go home, I thought to myself. Just go home and stop acting so foolish. Another several hours lost commuting to and from London due of my foolish doubts. When Jenny stood up, my gut tightened. She looked amazing and gorgeous in a tight black little dress that skimmed just below her bottom, leaving her long, slim legs bare and molding to her body so that even from across the room I could tell she wasn't wearing a bra. My middle grip tightened. But it wasn't only how beautiful my wife was. I'd never seen that garment before. And it wasn't the smart gray skirt suit Jenny had left our house in just a few hours before. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was acting ridiculous again. Unreasonable? Why wouldn't she dress for an evening meeting? Why shouldn't Jenny dress sexily to impress an important customer? She grinned at him after laughing at something he said. We smile. The one that would illuminate the street outside. The smile I had always imagined. She made a reservation for me. Worse, she reached up to him and placed her hand on his chest, playfully and coquettishly, which is not a gesture a lady would make to a professional customer, not unless she knew him well. Very well done. The possibility that it was a friend of her father's crossed my mind, an old family acquaintance, perhaps like an uncle. But I was grasping for straws. When Jenny leaned up on tiptoes to kiss him on the cheek, my world went black. A dark wrath flooded over me, only to be exacerbated as he bent down and returned the kiss, this time directly on her lips, the two of them maintaining it for longer than any uncle and niece should have. The prick, the filth sucker, the cheating scum sucker. I wanted to murder him, but all I could do was stand there and watch Jenny play up to him even more, cuddling up to him as he wrapped his arm tenderly around her, smiled at him like she frequently did to me as he patted her bottom, molding her wonderful body into his as he squeezed her tightly. I couldn't breathe. I wanted air, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't take my eyes away from the horrible image unfolding in front of me. They kissed again, this time with more intensity, and Jenny, my beautiful, dear Jenny, appeared blissfully immersed in the presence of this unknown stranger. "Can I help you, sir?" I looked around and saw a uniformed flunky questioning my right to be there. "I'm questioning my right to witness my darling wife make out with some scumbag." "Stranger." "Go to hell," I yelled, way too loudly. After that, Things spiraled out of control and he sought assistance. 3 of the manhandlers dragged me out to the back entrance while I watched Jenny run off with the stranger, laughing at his no doubt idiotic bloody jokes, running her hand up and down his back and making no objection as he reached down and cut the cheeks of her buttocks as if he owned them. I found myself on the floor in a back alley with a few scrapes on my face, but no significant injuries. I made my way back to the front and stormed back in, intending to face her and see what was happening. But the security people apprehended me again, flung me out on my ear, and threatened to be less kind if I didn't go. They refused to listen to my protest that my wife was in there with another man. I slinked away, looking blankly up at the windows, wondering which pair of curtains they were hidden behind, and thinking about what that scum sucker was doing to my Jenny. Jenny, my dearest one, tearing at my spirit. What control did he have over her? Where did the money come into the picture? Damn that! Money didn't matter anymore. My wife Jenny was in there someplace getting screwed by her lover, and I couldn't stop it. Again in flashback. After that last date, everything went smoothly. I felt like a teenager in love again, and it wouldn't go away. Jenny seemed the same, and I met her parents, who appeared thrilled that someone had finally won her heart. We were married 6 months later, the largest wedding I'd ever been to or was likely to attend. Her wealthy parents paid for everything, and they appeared to be more concerned with putting on a nice show than anything else. I vaguely tried to find out if she had a bad history, or why she was still a virgin in her 20s in this day and age, but she refused to discuss it, vowing to tell me everything one day. And we were so happy and in love it didn't seem to matter. The first 6 months were wonderful, unless you worked for me, in which case no one appeared to be able to get much sense from me. It didn't matter because everyone was delighted for me. Even my competitors were so moved that they didn't take full advantage. They absolutely did not. When we lost a large account, it served as a wake-up call, forcing me to put in much more work in my business. Not that I disregarded Jenny, but she noticed the difference. I think I'd lost some of her enthusiasm and appeared a little sad. "What's up, Jenny, love?" I requested for the 10th time, not expecting a sensible response. She looked at me and sighed. She finally admitted that she was bored. "Not with you, not at all. You are fantastic." I smiled back at her. I'm glad to hear her say that. Even if our lovemaking had slowed somewhat in recent months, I need something that will pique my curiosity, keep my mind working. Maybe I could do some work for my previous agency. She had ceased working for them shortly after our marriage and appeared content. But there was clearly something missing in her life recently. "Will they take you back? Have you asked them?" I ventured, thinking it may be a good idea. Jenny smiled. It was that smile that made me realize she had made up her mind, and there was no way I could argue, even if I had thought of one. "They've called me every month since we married. They're yearning for me to return." She sang out, "I've mentioned that I might go back and do some things, just part-time." It was settled. The following week, she returned to London to see them, and a few days later began performing some afternoon meetings for them. She returned home that evening, beaming, as pleased as Larry. She'd had a lovely day, and everything was well again. The Matthews household was back on track. Jenny found her enthusiasm for life and increased her energy for sex, so I had nothing to complain about. Jenny had always preferred straightforward sex, which I attributed to her lack of experience, as she shied anxiously away from anything unusual, but from then on she felt liberated, ready to do anything. It was astonishing how naturally talented she was and how much she enjoyed it all. I had no notion why I deserved such extraordinary pleasure. I didn't worry about it, and I simply enjoyed it. The next 2 years or so were amazing. After the early problems were resolved, we spent every spare time together, and I cried when she left for the evening, even more so when she was gone for a long weekend in Paris, New York, or wherever. But her profession primarily required her to travel to London, and whenever possible, I attempted to arrange for me to meet her there for lunch, before she vanished for the evening to attend some function. Then I found the bank statement, and everything changed. I could not believe she was cheating on me, but the proof was there. I had seen it. I saw her kissing and cuddling with her lover in the hotel. I'd noticed his hand on her ass, his fingers slipping up under the back of her short dress. I had no doubt that they'd ended up within it, not much later on. The thought of that brought tears of frustration and wrath to my eyes. How could she accomplish this? How could she have cheated me like this? What made this American boy stand out? What does he have that I don't? Is it a bigger tool or what? Damn that. He was 20 years older than me and 30 years older than her. Maybe it was someone she worked with, although he appeared strange, so it may have been her employer. And I seem to recall her mentioning that one of the filmmakers was American. Bosses are not allowed those liberties, no matter how close their professional relationship is. Not unless something is on my mind. When in circles, I felt like crying. Perhaps this has been going on for some time. Perhaps that is why she wanted to return to work for them. Maybe. Damn it. I wasn't sure what to think. It was Thursday morning, the day after I'd been kicked out of the hotel, and I couldn't take it anymore. I'd heard Jenny's car arrive home in the early hours, and I wondered how many times she'd come home this late with him while I was deep asleep. It took some time for her to get up to bed. Even in the dim light, I could see she had already changed into her nightgown. Maybe you showered in the extra bedroom as well, perhaps so that I wouldn't notice the scent of her boyfriend on her. I was furious, but I was determined to hold off until the morning. If I was going to toss her out, she'd have to deal with it. However, if I were stepping out the door, the early hours would not have been very inviting. I prayed for an explanation, and for her to laugh about it in the morning. Tell me about the foolish jerk who tried to take advantage of her. She cuddled up to my back, but I feigned to be asleep, unwilling to be disturbed from my slumber, despite the fact that she nestled up close, threw her arms around me, and kissed my back of neck. I wondered that we'd ever sleep together again. Forget about making love. She finally gave up, which made me relieved. Probably for her as well. She wouldn't have to pretend any longer. The next morning, I was up and dressed before her, but I hadn't had as lively an evening as she had. "Hello, sweetheart," she yelled out as she walked into the living room, her beauty almost making me reconsider my plans. "How are you doing this morning?" I didn't respond. I sat there impassively, my heart pounding while she gazed around at me, the cup in her hand crashing back to the table as it dropped from her grasp. "What on earth happened to you?" she cried. Her concern could have been genuine. The 2 bruises that had been added to the cuts on my face the second time I was sent out came as a surprise. Jenny attempted to run to my side, but I held up my hand to stop her. Perhaps my expression had more to do with it. "What is up, Jim? What happened?" she demanded urgently. "I was kicked out of a bar last night," I said tersely. "I did not receive the reaction I expected, but I should have expected it." "What? You were tossed out of a bar," she squealed in her distinctly English accent. "You silly menu, what have you done? Getting intoxicated or something?" She smirked and almost giggled as she pictured me, the pillar of respectability, being kicked out of a pub. "Jim, I hope that wasn't the bull. We're meant to go there tomorrow night." Her grin faded as she realized I was not smiling back. From now on, I would relish this little talk and, in some little way, punish her for what she had done to me. "What is up, Jim?" she asked simply. "Sit down," I instructed. "You may need to." I waited a few moments, enjoying the strain on her face. She sensed something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. The shoe was now on the other foot. I wasn't booted out of a pub. It was a bar, a hotel bar. Hotel bar. Which hotel? "One in Cambridge," she inquired, unable to comprehend where this conversation was leading. Not Cambridge, London, or the West End, but rather along the lines of Knightsbridge. I noticed a tremble in her lips, nothing more than that. But the mention of Knightsbridge surprised her. That is where she spent the night. "Which hotel?" she inquired, but she'd already lowered her gaze. I suppose she knew what was coming. "What about the Grand Central?" I replied calmly. "It's immediately outside the square. Perhaps you are aware of this, Jenny. Perhaps you have been there recently. Maybe." Jenny wiped her palm across her brow before looking up, trying to force a smile. She didn't realize how much I knew. Christ, I had no idea how much I knew. "Okay, I was there last night. I was working," she whispered, then spoke louder and more boldly. "Christ, Jim, you knew I was going there. I told you so. I always tell you where I'm heading. What is this all about? It's about the people you were with," I responded, outwardly calm, if not internally. She was looking directly at me. Not sure what to say. "A client?" "Just a client," Jenny said at last, but her voice wavered. I believe she already knew she had lost. "Do all of your clients get to feel your ass? Do they all act as if they own you? Do you kiss them all as if they were your lovers? I tossed something at her. I'm losing all control of my emotions. Jenny's face vanished as she glanced at me. She burst into tears. I should have felt triumphant, but I only felt heartbreak. We are heartbroken. I still loved her, you see. I fought the need to rush to her, hold her, and tell her not to worry. It was too late for that. I waited since there was no chance I would see the next phrase. What she said next might just make a difference. After a time, she glanced up and whispered, "I love you, Jim," while still sniffing back her tears. Then she burst out crying again. The grief was coursing through her entire body. I waited till she calmed down again, waiting for her to speak first. "What did you see, Jim?" she asked timidly. "I'll tell you how I saw you. I saw you smiling and kissing him. I noticed you rubbing his back and him fondling your backside, which you did not appear to object to. I saw the two of you walking arm in arm toward the stairs, his hand halfway up the back of your dress. That is what I saw. I assume you were heading to his bedroom, is I right?" Jenny looked at me, sadder than I had ever seen her. She opened her lips to say no, but quit since it was a waste of time. Then she nodded, just enough to admit that my concerns were right. Her eyes were filled with total shock. "I assume you screwed one another, screwed away all night, and then had the audacity to return here smelling like him. That is not true. She'll be back. I did not come back like that. I took a shower before leaving the motel. I would never do that to you. I promise." I didn't know what her promises were worth anymore, so I carried on. "So why did you change in the other room? Why didn't you undress in our room as you usually would? I didn't want to wake you if you were asleep, and I definitely didn't want to wake you up." Her response was quick. Had the ring of truth, yet didn't excuse her. And why was that? "I asked last because you didn't want me to know how late you returned." "Maybe," Jenny whispered, almost inevitably, after a few moments, and not for the first time, despite my shot at her. Her silence confirmed my accusation. "What do we do now, Jenny?" I inquired after another long quiet. The only noise she made was sniffling as she fought to contain her emotions. This was not as enjoyable for me as I had thought. "I'm not sure, Jim, but I do love you. Only you. You are the only one." "Yes, Jenny, I'm the only person you adore. But you make love with another guy behind my back. That's quite compelling. I firmly believe that. It was only sex. We did not make love. Not love. It was all about the sex, which was enjoyable and exciting. But only sex. And there is a difference." I questioned her. She nodded her head. "Yes, there is a difference. A significant difference. Please, Jim, understand. There is a major difference." I was in no mood to understand the difference, and I was having difficulty controlling my fury. "Is this your lover?" I continued. "Who is he? How long has it been going on? He is not my sweetheart. I told you he isn't. It's not as you think, Jim. Honestly, there is simply nothing between us. Please, believe me. It's—" "Shut up, you idiot," I interrupted her. "Stop making things worse. Don't lie to me. Do you think I am bloody stupid or something? Tell me now. How long have you been screwing him? Is it weeks, months, or perhaps years?" Jenny responded calmly. "I only met him last night," despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I met him at the hotel, possibly 5 or 10 minutes before you saw us. Yes, and I meant to believe that I imagine he brought you a drink of wine and made you intoxicated. They took advantage of you. You pitiful tiny cow. No, it was not like that. Jim was my stunning virgin." Bride gave a hushed answer. "As I mentioned, I was working. He paid me to have sex with him." Jenny's story. "Hi. I imagine you all think I'm bad, and I don't blame you. Jim was heartbroken when I informed him that the guy in the hotel had paid me for sex, that I was a call girl. I attempted to tell him that I wasn't. I said I worked as an escort girl, but who was I kidding? I no longer recognized myself. He labeled me a cheap prostitute, which deeply offended me. Made me cry. I can't bear the word prostitute, and I don't consider myself one. Perhaps it was a trivial variation in wording, but it had always allowed me to accept myself. And inexpensive. I don't know. I was absolutely not cheap. Not by any standard. My clients were all quite wealthy, which was necessary for them to give me a commission. My agency. The Golden Circle included elite politicians, athletes, and business leaders from all around the world, as described by the press. Like the other, I had regulars once a month, some of whom I had known for years. A pair. Before I even met Jim, I prayed to God that he would never find out. There were people from the United Kingdom, America, Canada, and France, among others. Quite a worldwide clientele. It was mostly while they were in London on business, although they would frequently invite me away for the weekend. Before I married Jim, it could take up to a week or more. That usually comes at a high cost. Several thousand. But I guess I provided decent value while I was with them. I was their girlfriend and mistress, sweet and attentive. For my clients, I must have been the ideal girlfriend. I was available on demand through a simple phone call to accomplish pretty much anything they wanted, but I was not present when they didn't need me. I never spoiled it by accepting money directly from them. That went through Golden Circle, and they paid my cut. But since I married directly into my secret bank account, I've never touched any of that money. I couldn't bring myself to do it, and it had long since ceased to be about money. That is, except for my alleged monthly salary, which was moved to my regular account to conceal what I was doing. And I made it a point to show Jim that on a daily basis so he wouldn't suspect anything. Then he discovered the damn statement. My world came crashing down when the man I loved so deeply and urgently discovered it where I had buried it overnight. I grieved for a week, and my eyes were red from my anguish. Jim stormed out of the home crying like a baby. I couldn't believe I could have harmed him that badly. It was foolish to believe I could get away with it indefinitely, and I'm not sure what I must have been thinking. It had simply become my way of life. I had been doing escorting when I met him, and I had stopped for more than 6 months after we married. It was addictive, and I found myself returning to it. I could say I was coerced, but that would be too simple, and I do not deserve any more. I forfeited my right to that. I had no idea where he had gone or where he lived. Despite my repeated calls, he refused to speak or listen to me. I was desperate and almost suicidal, and while I understood his pain, I knew he loved me, or at least had, and I couldn't understand how he could cut me off so quickly. I isolated myself from everyone and had no friends in the world. I realized that my lifestyle had presented me with so many so-called friends, but none with whom I could confide. There was no one to whom I could weep my heart out. There was one, of course, but he refused to communicate with me. Who could blame him? I rejected down several dates since I was not feeling well. I must have sounded dreadful over the phone, so I suppose they believed me. Anyway, I was in no condition to entertain any males, to my disgrace. Even yet, I never considered telling them I was done with that way of life. I hope it was just because I didn't think about it clearly. After around 10 days of no contact, Sarah at his office graciously declined my request to be put through to him. I chose to go there. By then, I'd stopped crying all the time, and my eyes had recovered slightly. Despite wearing makeup, I still looked like a disaster. Though I am rather attractive, I am not naturally an extraordinary beauty like other ladies. But I've always been able to make the most of my appearance, and I've received the best education money can buy. I have a good figure, and I know how to stand, walk, and hold myself because I was taught by the greatest in the world at my finishing school in Switzerland. I taught myself how to laugh at men's jokes and how to converse with them about topics they would be interested in. I knew I had a beautiful grin, but it was something I had from birth. I was used to seeing heads turn when I went into a room, and I loved it. Almost came to expect it. But I didn't attract any attention that day. None at all. "Christ, Jenny, you look terrible," Sarah exclaimed as I approached her desk. We had gotten quite over the last few years, but she was usually the picture of discretion, so my appearance must have startled her. "Sorry, Jim is not present. When will he come back?" I asked, trying not to cry again. Sarah stared at me pitifully, stood up, and softly grasped my arm. "Come on," she urged. "I am due for a break. Let's go get some coffee somewhere." Over coffee? Actually, I drink tea. She told me that Jim saw my car pull into the parking lot and exited through the back door as I entered through the front. He informed her that we had a major disagreement, but he did not explain why, which made me sigh in relief. He refuses to discuss it. She stated that he is in a bad state. "Would you like to tell me what it is about?" "I cannot," I responded. "But this is my fault, not his. That's bad. Sarah responded with a knowing look. "Worse than that," I responded. "Significantly bad. I think you should find someone to talk to about this." She recommended someone close to you whom you could trust. It was sound counsel, but I had nobody. I was close to my parents, an only child. But how can you begin a conversation like that? I haven't mentioned it before, Daddy, but I've been working as a prostitute since I graduated from Oxford University, and my husband has only now found out. No, that simply wasn't possible. I had no one, and I would have to figure it out for myself. However, things did not go as planned. The agency kept ringing, and I finally had to admit what had transpired, which my husband had discovered. Dear, they said, but that was about it. The last thing they wanted to do was get embroiled in a marital fight. A week later, Ralph called. Ralph was another of my American clients, approaching 60 but in excellent form. A lover. And I'd known him long before I met Jim. We got along fairly well, and I believe I had some pretty strong sentiments for him. Nothing like what I had for Jim. Anyway, he was married, and I had met his wife before, but I was introduced as a subordinate business contact. Ralph was one of the only 2 dates I had ever given my phone number to. I felt like I could trust him. I apologized, Ralph, when I heard his voice. I am not available at the moment. It might not be for some time. Golden Circle informed me you were bad news. He said something to me over the phone, and I fell into tears. You need to talk to someone, don't you? Ralph moved on. Let's meet someplace. Perhaps I can help. Ralph, please. No, do not ask me out. I'm in no position to give you what you want. Is it time for payback? He said quietly. Tom, I did something for you, not the other way around. I vow not to fool around. Meet me at the normal location. No, not there. I'll come up to Cambridge. Where do you recommend? 5 hours later, I was sitting in front of Ralph, and he began questioning me. Do you want him to return? He asked first. I said, of course I did. But there appeared to be little hope. If not, I'd be delighted to. Polly, you're already aware of this, and we haven't gotten along well for quite some time, and I believed I had interrupted him. Please, Ralph, do not abandon me down that path. I like you, okay? Jim, I love you in some ways, but you are not. Sorry, but you are not Jim. Ralph nodded regretfully. That's what I expected. Jenny, sorry, but I just had to ask. I had to get this out of the way. I smiled at him. He was so sweet. Jim will not speak to me, Ralph. He just won't speak to me. I do not know what to do. I don't understand how, if he loved me, he could cut me off so suddenly. And I don't think you appreciate just how badly you've ruined him, his entire world. Young lady, Ralph responded, but he simply doesn't understand. It was only sex. Just what I need. It's exciting. It's like a drug. And I don't seem to be able to function without being with a variety of men all the time. I didn't sure who I'd sleep with from week to week. I can't seem to explain it to anybody. I poured out my thoughts, revealing how, even when I stopped after getting married, I was miserable after only 6 months with only one boyfriend. He was wonderful, though, and as much as I loved him. Just sex. Was that it? Ralph asked. Yes, there was never anything else. Just sex. You smiled at me. You made me happy with your kisses. Was it just sex all the time? Ralph asked. He was not asking. He was questioning whether I had accurately expressed my sentiments. I thought about it. I remembered what it was like to be with him. Remember the feelings we experienced when we made love? Yes, made love. I did not have it. I was kidding myself, even if it had often been just sex with the majority of them, an adventure to share and forget with Ralph and a few others. It had been more than that, far more. Do you recall how you reacted when you discovered I had gone with one of the other girls while you were on holiday, Jenny? Ralph requested, softly reminding me of how angry I had gotten, how I had yelled and screamed at him. I sulked for a few weeks and even got angry with poor Jim, who was completely blameless. Could you imagine? Jim must be feeling something right now. Could you imagine how much terrible things must be for him? When I looked up at Ralph, the knowledge of what I'd done to Jim hit me like a ton of bricks. I started crying, but not for myself. I cried for him. My hubby is my love. I cried as I'd never cried before in my life. I was heartbroken because I had crushed his heart. Ralph lovingly took me in his arms and rocked me as I wailed like a baby. I'm not sure what I can do, but I'll try, he whispered to me. I only hope he thinks of you as much as I do. I'd do anything, absolutely anything, to have a sliver of a hope of winning Jim back. I'd fight against my want to go with other men. And I prayed to God that I would be strong enough to reject it, to have the fortitude to say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, and I would start right immediately. Yes, I would. I immediately tell Ralph to stop undoing the buttons of my blouse. I will. I am determined. I will. I will advise him to halt immediately. Right now. I mean it. Right now. Right now. I will tell him to stop. I did it because I adore Jim. I stood up and returned home. I was still in my thoughts, feeling the anguish. I really wanted to meet Jim. I tried, but never found him. I tried calling, but his phone was turned off. 3 days later, I arrived at my mother's home. A man dressed in a suit approached and knocked on the door. I opened, and the man asked whether I was Mrs. Jenny. I nodded. "You've been served." He handed over the manila package and went away. It was exactly what I was fearing. I knew I had lost Jim permanently. It took 7 months. I battled my divorce, but he never gave in. Finally, the judge gave Jim what he wanted. He never spoke with me. I attempted to contact him several times following the divorce, but he never answered. I never got married or dated again. I heard Jim went to a distant state and is now engaged to a school teacher. So life goes on. Fortunately for me, it shifted to a darker world. Next, let's move on to the second wonderful story with Queen Cheating Tales. "What?" I remarked, turning my head to gaze at my wife, Carol. "What have you just said?" I inquired, skeptical of my own thoughts. "I'd just heard. Dan, I know you'll be furious, but I'm not happy right now. And I'm thinking about obtaining a trial separation so I can gather my thoughts and decide what I want," Carol informed me as I stood on the porch grilling steaks. My friend Karen had a spare room and invited me to stay with her for the time being. "When were you planning to inform me, Carol? Or would you just leave me a letter on my pillow tonight?" I spoke slightly loudly than he probably should have. "Do not raise your voice, Dan. I do not want Andy to hear what we are talking about. Andy is our 6-year-old kid. I knew you'd react like this. That is why I did not want to bring it up until tonight. So you've already decided to leave. Will you inform Andy or will you leave it to me after you've left?" I spoke in a sarcastic tone. She said, "I'll tell her myself tonight before bed." "You should know that this is not permanent. You're correct. Karen, you are moving in with that tramp." "I suppose I should have seen this coming," I told her, becoming angrier by the minute. "I'll write up the paperwork tomorrow. You can sign it, and I'll get it submitted with the court by Wednesday, Carol." What paperwork was her response? "So, if you're going to go, I wanted to have a legal separation. That manner, if you do not return, the divorce decree will be immediately issued. This way, we won't have to go through the entire process twice." I told her I didn't want a divorce, Dan. I only have a short time to myself to figure things out. "That's it, honey," Carol responded. "Carol, that's bullshit," I spit back at her. "I've been asking you to talk to me for the past 4 months, but you've been too preoccupied with Karen and your new acquaintances to find the time. You want to move in with your new friend, Karen, so you can continue doing what you're doing now. Probably wanted to do for the past 6 months. I yelled, "But you are not going to do it with my blessings, and I am not going to stand by and become a cub for you or anyone else," I said, slamming the grill lid down. This was not going as Carol had hoped. She knew Dan would be angry, but she believed she could persuade him that this would be a learning experience for both of them. But now it had exploded in her face. "Daniel, please." That was all Carol could say before he went off in a huff, leaving her to tend the grill, removing the steaks and placing them on the countertop. She started searching for him. She discovered Dan upstairs in their bedroom. He was basically putting all of her clothes and belongings into the other bedroom. "Take your shit and get out. I don't care anymore," I screamed at her. "I will send the paperwork to your office. Sign it and get it back." Keith. Dan has been employing the same lawyer for the last 6 years. "Do not worry. I will take Andy out to supper so he does not have to witness his mother abandoning him," I said, collecting my coat and sunglasses before stepping out to my car. "Karen, this is Carol." She started. "Dan did not take it well, not doing well at all, and has threatened me with divorce." Carol began to tear up. "I warned you he wouldn't be happy, but don't worry, he'll come around soon," Karen informed her over the phone. "Helen, in a few weeks he'll be begging you to come back, and you'll have him just where you want him. I hope you're right, Karen, because he's about to throw me out the door and start divorce proceedings." She replied hesitantly. "I need some time apart, but I do not want to end my marriage. Carol said I'd be right over to help her with her belongings." Karen reminded her that the sooner she is on her own and away from him, the sooner she will be able to figure out what she truly wants. Karen drove over and assisted. Carol packed the most of her belongings and left the house before Dan and Andy returned. I'd been expecting this for a long. Carol and I were both CPAs who met 8 years ago while auditing a Chapter 7 firm. Each of us represented a different bank that had a financial stake in the bankrupt company. We worked together and ate lunch and dinner practically every night. It took us a full week to do the audit, and by then we had discovered that we really enjoyed one another. Carol stood about 5 feet 6 inches tall, had brown hair, and weighed around pound 175. She had a lovely face, but was slightly chubby. Dan was about 5 and 8, 195 pounds, and at 22, he already had a spare tire around his midsection from eating out every day. These two geeks were meant for each other. We married 4 months later, and Carol became pregnant 8 months after that. Carol had a difficult pregnancy, was bedridden for the final 5 months, and had gained a lot of weight by the time she gave birth to Andy. She expanded to nearly pound 250. However, I remained silent. I liked her regardless of her weight. We were a happy family until Carol overheard 2 of her co-workers speaking about her. She's a very attractive woman. One girl told the other to go to bed. She's as large as a house. I'm curious whether she has her outfits custom created at Omar. She laughed aloud as she mentioned the tentmaker's garment shop. They might have thought it was humorous, but Carol did not. Carol was crying in the restroom when Karen entered. "Are you all right, Carol?" she asked. "Everyone thinks I'm a fat pig," she remarked, weeping. "If they understood how difficult it was for me to lose weight, they wouldn't be so harsh." She wailed, "Girl, all you need to do is follow a healthy diet and join a gym." Karen informed her, "You are a beautiful girl hiding beneath all that flab." "That is all. You simply need to make up your mind and do it." That's what Carol did. I handled the accounting for a local gym and secured us a fantastic membership rate. We joined the following week. The gym had an in-house childcare, so we could bring Andy with us after work. Carol was a woman possessed and worked out 6 days a week, whereas I could only fit in 3 nights per week. When the pounds didn't suddenly melt away, Carol went to the doctor and got a prescription for diet pills. I wasn't happy about it, but Carol was determined to lose weight. Carol weighed only pound 125 and looked beautiful 8 months later. She got a complete new outfit, and everyone, especially the males at work, thought she looked amazing. That's when the trouble began. We were at Carol's company Christmas party when things went horribly wrong. Carol wore a revealing dress and was hit on all night by her male co-workers. She was ecstatic about all of the attention she was receiving. When a group of males caught her under the mistletoe, she must have kissed a dozen before I came over and stopped it. Carol had undoubtedly had too many drinks and didn't know the guys' hands were all over her as they kissed. I took Carol by the arm and told her it was time to leave. She didn't want to leave quite yet and caused a scene. "Carol, I am leaving now, with or without you," I finally informed her. She backed down, but I could tell she was angry. We got into a big quarrel on the way home. "Carol, you acted like a cheap tramp tonight. I, along with everyone else, witnessed those guys put their hands all over your body while you did nothing to stop them," I yelled. It was only a little innocent fun. "No big deal," she responded. "Not from where I stand," I told her. "How would you like it if I kissed and grabbed a girl?" I inquired, but I knew she was too drunk to listen to reason at the time. Carol got unwell that night. Fortunately, she had removed her new clothing before tossing the cookies. She looked terrible the next morning and apologized to me, stating it would never happen again. But it did. It's only that I wasn't available the next time. Carol began stopping after work on Wednesdays for a girls' night out. 7 gals, some married and some not, would pop by Tony's after work for a glass or two. She was supposed to be home by 6:30 p.m., but that quickly turned into 7:30 p.m., and then nearly 9 p.m. Carol arrived home after Andy had gone to bed, and I was in a bad mood when they first married. We had sex like teenagers and couldn't get enough of each other. Now it appeared that doing it once a week was excessive. Carol was always excited when she arrived home on Wednesday nights, and tonight was no exception. We hadn't had much sexual experience when we first got married, so we were hesitant to attempt anything new right away. We learned from each other what we liked, and with a few X-rated maneuvers, we expanded our repertory significantly. However, every week when Carol returned home, she seemed to want to do something new and interesting. Most of it made me question where she got the idea when we married. Carol couldn't even do a B job, but even a lousy B job was preferable to no B job at all. Tonight, she stepped out of the restroom completely naked, asking, "Where's my stud muffin?" She had had more than a few beers and arrived later than usual, but she knew how to put me in a good mood. She climbed up from the foot of the bed between my legs, removed my underwear, and gave me the finest B job. I believed she was already pouring when I rolled her over and began to descend on her before she intervened. "Please take me tonight, hun. I just want you to give me the best sex of my life," she stated. I did my best. I don't want to get off too soon. I considered my mother, my new audit plan, and just about everything else, so I'd go a few minutes longer before dropping my load. Carol appeared to relish it, screaming as if I was about to murder her. I finished doing her and emptied my hot load into her boxes. Carol slumped into the bed. "God damn, I needed that," she explained. "But I guess I'll be sore for a week," she laughed, lying onto her back. I snuck up, kissed her, and said how glad I was to be married to her. That is how it was until this week. After supper, Andy and I returned home to an empty house. That witch Karen, I thought to myself. Karen has been pestering Carol to do this or that with her ever since she lost that weight. No wonder her spouse abandoned her. She was nothing but a tramp, and now she is converting my wife into one as well. I prepared Andy for bed. I tucked him in and told him a tale when he inquired about his mother. I basically informed him that Mommy was visiting and will be back in a few days, but I didn't believe it for a moment. I went downstairs, called my mother, and brought her up to date. "Mom, could you please watch Andy during the day until I find someone permanent?" I asked. "Honey? Carol will come to her senses and return by the end of the week. Do you know her? She can't be away from Andy for more than a few hours without losing her mind," Mom told me. "But I'll come over before you go for work and watch him." I hope she was correct, but I wasn't as certain as my mother. On Monday, I informed Keith that Carol had left me. I want to ensure that I am completely protected, including having permanent custody of Andy. I want it written down and clearly stated that if any of us acts in a way that a married spouse should not, the other would receive a 65-35 share of the assets. I believe she is planning to cheat on me, and I want to be prepared. I informed Keith I wanted a 60-day expiration date, after which it would become a divorce decree. "And can you finish it by tomorrow?" I asked. "Dan, aren't you jumping the gun a little? She just left." "And you're ready to draft divorce papers?" he asked me. Carol has been planning this for a while, and hopefully it will bring her to her senses. If not, I don't want to lose all I've worked for just so she can test out a new tool. I told him. "All right, Dan. I'll finish it today and serve her at work tomorrow. Anything else?" "Not that I can think of. I simply need to draw a line in the sand so she understands what she stands to lose. That is all. Also, Keith, I'll need 2 more agreements made. But we have a little time for those. I'll fax you what I need later in the week." Carol got to work on Tuesday. She was a small bond. This was the longest she had been away from Andy and Dan in the previous 8 years. She returned from lunch and was told that the man was waiting in her office. "Carol Spencer?" he asked. "Yes, I am Carol. What can I do for you?" she responded. "You've been served," he remarked, passing her a manila packet. Carol spent the next half hour going over all of the terms and property divisions outlined in the separation decree, which read more like divorce paperwork. It indicated that Dan will have temporary but complete custody of Andy. Carol, however, would be allowed to visit with adequate notice. When she finished reading it, she felt more hurt than outraged. "I've been gone for 2 days, and Dan has already written off our marriage," she told herself. She attempted to contact Dan, but his secretary stated he was out for the day and his phone went directly to voicemail. Dan was currently at home, changing the locks, separating their finances, and removing Carol's name from his insurance. And $401K. By 4 o'clock, I had completed all of my tasks and turned on my cell phone. "Shit," I said to myself. Carol sent 12 messages. I removed them all. I ate dinner with Andy at my mother's house and told her what I had done. "Carol is going to be furious, Dan. I would be if I were in her position." "How far do you intend to take it?" she asked. All the way, Mom, I responded. I can't mend our marriage by myself, especially because she refuses to listen to reason, so I've increased the stakes. She began this mess, but by God, I will finish it if I discover she has been cheating on me. I used to trust her, but now I don't believe anything she says. So right now I'm defending both my son and myself. If we can get back together, it would be fantastic. If not, I will hold all of the cards. I've never seen this side of you, son. Remind me not to get on your wrong side, my mother said with a laugh. Carol arrived at her residence and attempted to use her key. What the hell, she said to herself before realizing it was a new lock. Damn. She opened her phone and dialed Dan's number again. As before, it went to voicemail. She left him another message. Everything is finally finished and in place, I thought to myself as I looked over my checklist. Now all I have to do is wait. Carol was in Dan's office Wednesday morning. My credit cards will not function, and when I went to pick up my medication on the way to work, they informed me that I no longer had insurance. Dan, do you really dislike me? Carol, I'm just covering my bases. Remember when you walked out on me? I will pay for all of Andy's home bills, but you will be responsible for your own from now on. That way, there will be no financial difficulties to argue over. Dan, you're letting this get completely out of hand. Carol now yelled. All I needed was a little time to myself. Leaning over my desk, I spoke in my most serious and deadpan tone. Carol, do you notice the word stupid tattooed on my forehead? I may not be the most astute guy in the world, but I was not born yesterday. Karen has moved your head so much that you can't find your bum with both hands. Do you believe you can go out and pretend you're single again without consequences? Think again. We don't talk the first time I find out you've breached your marital vows. You have probably already done it. So I'm not even sure why we are having this talk right now. I'm very upset at you right now. I can't see clearly, so I think it's best if you leave. So I avoid saying anything that will jeopardize the remainder of our marriage. With that, I sat down. Carol was astonished and outraged. You cannot dictate to me as if I were a small child. I am an equal partner in this marriage, so screw you, she spit at me. Well, that hasn't changed much in the last 6 months, but I assume you're already receiving everything you can manage on the side, I said just loudly enough for Carol to hear. With that, she turned and walked away. I knew she hadn't done anything yet, but she had come close. You see, I started having her followed on Wednesdays about a month ago. There was a lot of pack and hand play, but that was the extent of it. I knew Carol would be tempted while living with Karen, so I wanted to make sure she knew what would happen if she cheated on me. But my life was disintegrating. The first 2 weeks were challenging. Carol made an effort to visit Andy, but never uttered more than 2 words to me. I still following her, but nothing new happened. She was still out with Karen and her buddies, but instead of only Wednesdays, she went out at least 4 nights a week. It appears that someone is trying to make up for lost time. Looking at the report, I told myself that I had found a nanny to care for Andy, a recent college graduate who was unable to find work. Beth was 23, blonde, around 5 feet, 9 inches tall, and had a slim body. She had completed her degree but could only find part-time work. When she spotted my ad for a nanny, she jumped at the opportunity. Beth was from a large family and knew how to care for and manage young boys. She had 2 younger brothers, so we agreed on pay and hours, and she moved in the next day. On Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday evenings, Beth worked as a waitress in a mid-priced family restaurant. On other nights, we all eat together. After a few weeks, Andy felt at peace around Beth, especially when she read to him before bed. Beth, I appreciate you going above and above for Andy, especially while his mother is currently absent. He needs all of the stability I can provide in his life, I said with the nicest smile I could manage. I know about you and your wife. Your mother gave me all the facts in case Carol came over and tried to grab him. Beth told me. I can't believe she just left you like that. I've only known you for a short time, yet you are one of the most kind men I've ever met, and I see you are madly in love with Andy. I suppose Carol became perplexed about what was truly essential and allowed others convince her that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence. I said, well, it'll be over either way in another 40 days, and that can't come soon enough for me. Little did I know that my life would change drastically in less than a week. You see, I work for an accounting business and am a silent partner there. I've brought in a lot of new business in the last 2 years. The proprietors made me a 15% partner. I requested that it be kept hidden, since I did not want to be identified as one of the owners. And in this way, I could learn what the employees truly thought of the organization and how it was being operated. My most recent triumph was a meeting with an offshore textile manufacturer that had operations in 5 Asian nations. I met the proprietors at a party around a year ago and pitched some of my ideas to them. They were impressed, very much so. We met the following week to discuss our firm's decision to take them on. Then I enjoy how your firm runs. You appear to go above and beyond the standard, bringing a personal touch to everything you do. One of the prospective owners informed them that each factory currently functions independently, so I need someone to put up the same system at each facility so that we can manage them all from a single overseas office. They were upset that I would not be in charge of the international operation, but I persuaded them that I would monitor everything myself to ensure that there were no mistakes. With a signed contract and a handshake, the celebration began. We'd been working on this account for 9 months, and I'd have delighted to come home and tell Carol the good news. I wish I could have taken her out to the greatest restaurant, brought her home, and ravished her body. But when I returned home, the house was empty, as was his heart. Beth arrived with Andy 20 minutes later with Chinese food. I was overjoyed and needed to share my wonderful news with someone. So I told Beth, "Forget dinner. We're all going out tonight to celebrate," I told her. "Put on your nicest, for we are going out in style." My bosses had made reservations at the best restaurant in town for 8 o'clock, and they were sending a limo to pick us up at 7:30, so we had to rush. I shaved, washed, and dressed. I told Beth that I'd prepare Andy so she'd have more time. By 7:15, Andy and I were both dressed and ready to go. That's when I noticed Beth descending the stairs. "I hope you do not mind. I didn't have anything special, but I discovered one of your wife's anxieties. That kind of fits." She explained to me that she was correct. It kind of fits. It suited her like a silk glove, but was a touch short because she was much taller than Carol. "Do you think it looks okay?" "You look fantastic, Beth." As the bell sounded, I spoke with my mouth open wide. The 3 of us were ushered into the rear of the limousine as Carol drove down our street. What the hell was she saying as she saw them all pile into the stretch limo? I wonder what's going on. She considered as she turned her car around to follow them. She then watched them exit and enter the eatery. That is some sucker. He'll take them to the best spot in town. And when I asked to go previously, he told we couldn't afford it. She steamed. Who the hell was the girl in my dress? We all had a fantastic night. I was the guest of honor, and we ate and drank our full. Beth told me it was time to leave since Andy was getting weary and it was way beyond his bedtime. You're correct. We'd better leave or he won't wake up for school. I thank everyone for dinner, but as they shook my hand, they were looking at Beth instead, and not just the men. Beth looked stunning tonight, and all of the other women envied her. They had all heard Carol's story about leaving to find herself, and it appears Dan wasted no time in replacing her. They chuckled to themselves. Andy fell asleep as soon as we got in the limo, so we had a calm ride home. I brought him upstairs, undressed him, and placed him in bed with a goodnight kiss on his forehead. I strolled downstairs in my tux and found Beth drinking wine at the kitchen table. "I'd like to thank you for tonight. You didn't need to take me." "You know," she said with a smile, "how could I have left you here tonight alone? Besides, I genuinely love your company, Beth," I replied, pouring myself a glass of wine. "I hope you didn't find it too dull tonight, sitting around with a group of accountants." "Quite the contrary. I had no idea your profession was so exciting and everyone appeared to like you, including me," she said with a small smile. "You made me feel like a member of your family, even though I am just the babysitter. Be calm, my heart. And I wish my efforts were less obvious," I thought as I concealed my erection from Beth. It had been a long since I had truly made love to a woman. Carol's last few interactions with me were disappointing since she was just going through the motions. I wanted to take Beth to my bedroom, but I knew I was still married, and I would stay true to Carol no matter what. Tonight was magical, and my mind is racing with things I would like to do right now, but they won't happen tonight. To my dismay, I informed her that maybe if things were different, but they aren't. So now I need to take a cold shower and sleep. I told Beth, kissing her on the face while she hugged me. It was 2 a.m. when I felt Beth climb into the bed beside me, by the heat she produced. I could see she was bare. I tried to say something, but she pressed her finger to my lips. I know we can't do anything tonight. I simply want to be close to you. That is all. She spoke as she spooned me. I awoke alone the following morning. I found Beth downstairs, clothed and preparing breakfast for the three of us. Nothing was mentioned. Carol was angry. I'm trying to figure out what I want in my life with Dan, and he's already kicked me out and found 3 or 4, she shouted, slamming her hand on the desk. She had made the mistake and mentioned it to Karen, who informed her that all spouses cheat on their wives and that they should go out tonight to celebrate her newfound freedom. She didn't want to go out and party tonight and wanted to chat to Dan, but he was usually in a meeting. How can one person be so incredibly busy? Carol and the group met again in Tony's, which was busy as usual after a few drinks. Carol and Karen, unlike the majority of their group, did not return home. Karen was already having sex with one of the attractive men who were vying for her attention. The other guy had her on the dance floor, and when the slow dance began, she fell into his arms. Carol found herself gradually succumbing to his approaches as his warm hands covered her entire body. She hadn't been with a man in a long time, and this guy was gorgeous, had the body of a Greek god, and desired her as much as she did him. She never stopped him from kissing her while they danced. She never stopped him as he led her to the corner of the dance floor, up against the wall. She should have stopped him when he slid his hands into her dress, fondled her jugs, and slipped her thong aside to feel her box. Yes, she should have stopped him, especially because Dan had hired a private detective who was recording everything. The 4 of them had returned to Karen's house, and Carol, now naked and laying on the bed with him, had finally come to her senses. I simply cannot do it, she said him. I'm still married, and no matter what, I still adore my spouse, she said over his protestations. So he left her alone. Carol took one of 2 frigid baths that night, one after he got out of her bed, and the other after she satisfied herself. Both climaxes. I need to get my head and boom! The following morning, she reminded herself, we are wired together. But factors beyond her control began to change her life, and not for the better. On my computer screen, I noticed Carol's images, the last of which showed the 4 of them entering Karen's apartment. I emailed them to my attorney and instructed him to prepare the papers but hold it until Monday. I think she's finally decided, I replied sadly, because I really wanted to get back together with Carol, but now I can't. I'll handle the Asian project myself. I told my supervisors the next day that I needed to leave, and this will offer me the opportunity to clear my mind and get my life back on track. Dan, I told them that everything is prepared to start on the 12th, which is a week from next Tuesday. Can you be ready to leave by then? They inquired. Give me 2 days to organize my affairs and find an apartment where I may ship my belongings. I told them I needed to talk to 2 more people today, and if everything goes as planned, I'd be ready. That afternoon, I organized my team to tackle all of my unfinished projects. I drafted documentation to give my mother power of attorney and instructed Keith to serve papers on Carol. The following Monday, I'd be securely in the air while she was served, the same amount of attention that she gave me. I said it sadly. That night, I went home to a house that would not be mine when I returned from overseas, and I was quite depressed. Carol and I had chosen it together, and there were so many pleasant memories linked with it. And now they would all be gone. I was unusually silent over dinner, and Beth assumed it was her fault. No, I just have a lot on my mind. We will chat after Andy has gone to bed. I told her that around 10 p.m., the house had quieted down as the 2 of us began talking. Beth spoke first. What is the problem, Dan? If it's about the other night, I really apologize. And this will not happen again. I promise, she told me. Beth, it is not that. Remember the party the company hosted for me a few weeks ago? So I've opted to do the foreign work myself and Andy, and I'll be departing early Monday morning. I told her. And I have an important question for you. I began to speak as I noticed Beth beginning to cry. Do you want to go with us? She turned from tears to grins. Hell yeah, she said as she rushed into my arms. Do you have an updated passport, Beth? I asked. She told me that I had it updated last year while on a cruise with my college mates. So it's all set. You'll need to get everything packed by Saturday since they're shipping out all of our belongings ahead of schedule. Leave only enough clothes for the remainder of the weekend and Monday's travel clothes. You can inform your family and friends, but I do not want Carol to know until we are in the air. I'm not sure if it's completely legal to simply take Andy with us and leave, but I'm doing it anyway. I'll address all of your questions when we get back, I told her. That night, I met with my mother and explained everything, including giving her my power of attorney. She'll definitely hit the fan with Carol on Monday afternoon. But I still want you to list the house for sale next week. Keith will email you a copy of the papers that I am sending to Carol, and if she has any questions, just tell her to contact Keith. Are you sure you want this, Dan? You don't want to attempt to work things out with her? My mother inquired. She's made her bed, and she can now lie in it with anyone she chooses. I told her you were taking Beth with you, she added, attempting to squeeze the final word out of her son. I'm not sure where we're going, but she makes me happy and keeps me calm. Aside from that, I may have actual affections for her. And that is all I will say about it. We'll be over Sunday night, so you may say your goodbyes to Andy, I told her. Monday. Carol was attempting to reach Dan on the phone when his office informed her that he was on a special outside project, but would forward the message to him. So what the hell was he doing? She reflected as she unsuccessfully attempted to contact him on his cell phone. Carol Spencer? A man inquired. She nodded. Have you been served? He remarked, passing her the envelope. What happens now? She said as she ripped open the packet. Dan left a quick message saying that I guess I'd made my decision. I hope you have a wonderful life. This is how he ended it. And then she viewed the photos. Shit, was all she could say. How the hell did he obtain those photos? She assumed the son of a witch had followed me, she said as she flipped through them. Not the kind of images you want to see of your wife with another man. But I've never slept with him. She told herself, I need to make him understand that. Gone. What do you mean by gone? Was her response. Dan is on a 4 to 5 month project overseas. He left with Andy on Monday morning. Dan's mother informed Carol that he couldn't take Andy away from me, especially outside of the nation. She shouted, I will take him to court. I'll see him in jail. She yelled at Carol. Dan has complete custody of Andy. Remember what you gave up when you left to find yourself. She reminded her that saying you screwed up royally would be an understatement. You had a wonderful marriage, but I suppose you wanted more. Now you have nothing. Dan's mother advised her that I needed to talk to him and explain that everything isn't as it seems, Carol remarked, weeping. I still love him and have never gone to bed with anybody else. He has to believe that. Carol, I've seen the images, and if my spouse was alive and doing what you were doing, I would divorce him as well. If I were you, I'd write him a letter explaining what you need, and I'd make sure he receives it. In the meantime, I hire a lawyer. Carol did an excellent job of expressing her case, noting that alcohol had played a significant role, that she had stopped using it, and that she had not gone all the way with anyone since leaving. Carol claimed she still loved me and would wait for me to come home. Dan's response was concise and to the point. Carol, you have not been a wife to me since you shed all that weight last year. It was as if you were too good for me. You weighed the attention of all the males and made me feel like I was being manipulated. On Wednesday nights, when you eventually chose to come home to me, you were all hot and bothered, and all you wanted was a nice sex rather than making love to your husband. I suppose I no longer turned you on. So now you and Karen may screw anybody you want. I warned you that Karen would eventually split us apart, but you knew better. You're correct, Andy. Beth and I are creating a new life founded on love and trust. You can see Andy whenever you want. Simply acquire a camera modem for your computer and I will set it up. Sign the papers because Mom is listing the house for sale this week. There is no way in hell that we will ever get back together, so do not hold out hope that I will change my mind. Carol, I hope you finally found what you were seeking for and are pleased. I never wanted this to happen. Carol knew Dan was correct. She'd been a stupid idiot for listening to all of her wonderful friends who were knowledgeable about the subject. I suppose that is why they were all divorced. She was planning to fight it until she received Dan's letter and then signed the paperwork. The irony was that 6 months later, Carol was back to the pound 175 she had started with 2 years before, but no longer had Dan. I was pleased, however. The work was a little difficult due to the language barrier, but I got through it. Andy was picking up words here and there and was able to interact effectively with all of the children he played with. Beth took care of Andy and organized our spare time. She characterized it as places to see and things to do. I still remember that night from months ago. We had just arrived in the nation and were all feeling a little worried. Andy resisted going to bed. My program wasn't going as well as it could, and Beth was feeling a little overwhelmed. She went into the den and kissed the back of my neck, which made me smile. She reached down, took my hand, and brought me to their bedroom. There was one candle on either side of our bed. We undressed and got into bed together. Let's just say heaven and earth merged that night. We experienced gentle, loving sex for the first time. Over the next few months, we did everything the other person requested, unless it involved pain or farm animals. We were more than pleased. 5 months later, my mother met us at the airport. She was pleased to see us all, particularly Andy. On the walk home, she kept glancing across at Beth, who appeared to be content. "How far are you along?" she asked her. Beth seemed taken shocked. 3 months. How did you know? She said, "I'm barely showing." You two seemed way too happy, like the cat that ate the canary. She told us that 2 weeks after we married and Rhonda was born 6 months later, Beth expressed a desire to join a gym in order to lose her baby weight. I looked like I had witnessed a ghost. 2 days later, I announced that I had engaged her as a personal trainer and that she would furnish all of the equipment. There's no use in going through all of that again. I thought to myself, dear listeners, please leave your opinions in the comments area below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Queen Cheating Tales channel.